What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube, and today I've got another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released films and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. Today I'm talking about one of the most hyped and consistently discussed horror movies of the year. As soon as the trailer dropped, everybody was hyped for it. What could it be? What could this mean? The trailer looks so cool and mysterious, but also reminiscent of previous 90s classics. I'm talking today about Osgood Perkins' Longlegs. Right away from the inception, I think this hit some festivals, and people saw Osgood Perkins' name, who is the son of Anthony Perkins, Psycho himself, who was a famous actor in the Hitchcock series and a famous director later on in the Psycho series and other films. And you hear Osgood Perkins, you hear Micah Monroe, who obviously came from like It Follows and a couple other really good horror films, just very talented actress, done good things in the horror genre, like The Guest as well. And then you hear Nicolas Cage. And for me, I kind of sighed a little bit. We'll talk about it. But Nicolas Cage has been doing some very crazy, over-the-top indie horror performances in the last couple of years. Some people don't like it. Some people are kind of in the middle, like myself. Some people absolutely love it. So you get a horror genre consistent actor like Micah Monroe, you get Nicolas Cage, you get Osgood Perkins, and you get this mysterious dark detective movie, and everyone gets excited. So I finally got to watch this yesterday with my buddy Neil. Shout out to Neil for going with me. And I wrote down a bunch of notes on the good and the bad of 2024's Longlegs. This movie is, as I said before, written and directed by Osgood Perkins, most notably known for, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. I saw that movie a couple of years back. While it's got its issues and it is paced like a slog at times, and I want to do a full review on that one, it's got many issues, but it is a very interesting, original, atmospheric, tense movie, and that's what I expected from this. So written and directed by Oz Perkins, starring Micah Monroe as Agent Lee Harker, Nicolas Cage as Longlegs, and Blair Underwood as Agent Carter. Essentially spoiler-free, and I won't be spoiling this. The movie still just came out last week, so go check it out. Spoiler-free, this story essentially does follow Lee Harker, Micah Monroe, as she and the FBI, she kind of plays a bit of a, not a clairvoyant necessarily, but kind of a partial psychic that obviously has some trauma in her life and obviously has some psychic abilities and gifts. So the FBI brings her along to follow along with the Longlegs killer and tries to track this methodical killer who kills based on patterns and seems to be connected to some kind of a cult. And that is essentially the story that I can give you without spoiling anything. But let's discuss the story overall. It's very reminiscent of a lot of, I've heard people say, like 90s crime thrillers. To me, it was very much like Kiss the Girls meets Silence of the Lambs. Obviously, you get your Sir Anthony Hopkins and your Nicolas Cage as your kind of antagonists. You get Jodie Foster and Micah Monroe playing your strong, smart, but silent and haunted protagonists. And Silence of the Lambs, for me, is the biggest comparison I can make to it. In some ways, it lives up to it. In some ways, it doesn't. Let's discuss them. Pros, right away. Cinematography jumps out. This very much suits Osgood Perkins' style. If you watch I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House and a couple of his other things, he has a Twilight Zone episode as well from the Jordan Peele version, where it's very much, he uses cinematography to build tension. Lots of long hallway shots, lots of like subversion shots where you're upside down or you have like an awkward angle, lots of shooting up at the characters to make them feel bigger and make them feel like they're looking down on you. Lots of using the walls as kind of your edge points for your shot, so you get those long, narrow things. Lots of wide-angle lenses to make you look for depth of field. And most importantly to me, the angles where you're getting, those depth perception shots where you got a character in the center in the foreground, and they're the subject of your shot, but you've got these hallways in the back or these moving things in the back that you're looking because you're constantly looking around in the shot, feeling very uneasy because you think something is going to attack the character. Whether it does or not, it engages you in every shot. When you shoot in this style, it is a bit distracting because you're not always paying attention to the main character in the shot, like Micah Monroe, who does a good job in this film. But it does engage you in every shot because you're tense. You're waiting for that jump scare. And sometimes when you don't get the jump scare, it's more rewarding because they could have taken the easy route and just done the jump scare. But instead they stayed in this long shot that subverted your expectations and you felt tense the entire time and you didn't get your big jump scare, but you're sitting there like this and you're looking around in the shot trying to see what's going to happen. So you're engaged in the movie the entire time and you feel a lot of what the character feels and you empathize for the character in the situation that you know something is going to happen in. So the tension is constantly there. Cinematography in this, A1, excellent. The editing also, they use some really slick editing stuff to transition from present day to flashbacks. They do some nice things with lighting and editing to show you kind of what the flashbacks are and what the current day stuff is. They do a lot of this is kind of where some of their jump scares come in. They use some flash shots to flash up on the screen, and it doesn't necessarily feel cheap because it's kind of what's going on in the mind of some of the characters. You're getting a peek into Micah Monroe and Blair Underwood and a few of the characters, what's going on in their minds, so you're getting a few flash jump scares. But it's a really stylized way of editing where it makes you, again, feel more tense, and that kind of gives you part of the horror aspect of the horror movie. And some of the shots kind of dissolve from one thing into another thing. There's a couple shots of Nicolas Cage's face they use for dissolves and kind of fading one shot into another seamlessly. It's really well pieced together, and they put a lot of time and timing into these sequences that let you know you're watching a piece of technically well done work. I mean, whether or not you love the story or engage with the characters, you're going to have to appreciate between the shots and the editing how much time they put into this stuff and how much style is in this movie, which is always the biggest basis for Osgood Perkins' work, in my opinion. I've watched one of his episodes and 3 of his movies now, and he is most known for those long, tense shots with the really polished technical stuff that make you feel ill at ease, and this does that for sure. The next thing that goes along with that is locations. Again, because they're using the wide-angle shots, you need something that feels cavernous and feels like there's a lot of angles that are wide open. They give you a lot of space to play with in the background. They give you a lot of long hallway shots and a lot of things to look at and keep your mind engaged and keep your eyes busy and give the characters a sense that something could be anywhere and jump out of any corner or any doorway, while at the same time feeling a bit trapped and feeling like there's an everlasting sense of dread, a retained sense of inescapability for the characters. And that's what this kind of location does. They found this kind of rustic little in-the-woods place that Lee Harker lives. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of cool rooms and cool design in this house, but also it kind of feels isolated. So you get the best of both worlds in the locations in this movie. All of the basements and the houses and everything feel very dank and dark and spooky. So well done there. Parts of Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage is going to be both in my positive and my negative parts in this review of this movie. I'm not a blanket person that loves indie horror over-the-top crazy Nick Cage or hates him. I'm in the middle somewhere. I tend to not like more than I like of his stuff in this genre. This one here was kind of split for me. The positive in the parts of Nick Cage that I liked, number one, the costume design, the makeup design of Nick Cage. They accentuated and hid Nick Cage at the same time. You're looking at this character and you're going, there's no way that's Nick Cage. That's not Nick Cage. And then you look and you're like, oh, it really is, because there's certain features that you're like, oh, wow, only Nick Cage could pull off a character like this. But also it's so disguised that it's making you kind of glare into it and also kind of gives you an uneasy feeling. So the makeup and the costume for Cage is wonderful. Props to that team. And also the moments when Nick Cage is more subdued. There are moments for this Longlegs character that oscillate and maybe I should say vacillate between kind of the Heath Ledger Joker when it's a more low manic kind of self-reflective, almost American Psycho type delivery, when it's cold and dark and almost given up and to himself. And those line deliveries, those American Psycho, those kind of Max Cady kind of things, that delivery is chilling and it's good and it's crisp and it's tense and you hang on every word. And then there's also kind of bits of Tim Curry's Pennywise, where it's really, really over the top and it has a bit of a drag feel, almost like like a Tim Curry and Rocky Horror almost. I even mentioned that as far as some of the makeup stuff. But it's like a Tim Curry over the top, purposely loud performance going against the more subdued, manic, reflective version of Nicolas Cage's character. And I love the dark, reflective stuff, but then sometimes it gets into this over the top caricature of a character we've seen before, and it feels like it's too much. But the subdued stuff was really, really nice. And then I have Micah Monroe. The acting overall in this movie, I think, is very solid. Blair Underwood's very good. That was a well-casted choice. Micah Monroe's phenomenal. I love Micah Monroe in It Follows and The Guest and here. And I do wish, and this is also going to go as part of a negative as well, I do wish Micah Monroe had a little bit more fleshing out, but because she's so good and her delivery is so good, that you really see more than just one thing or the other. You don't just see somebody who's tortured. You don't just see a badass final girl like Sigourney Weaver. You don't just see any one thing with Micah. It's this, something's a little off. Something is a little bit secretive. Something is a little bit quiet. But something is a little strong. Something is determined. Something is working hard. You see a lot of things happening, even throughout weird delivery and limited dialogue from Micah Monroe. You see Lee Harker as a fully fleshed out character with layers, and you see some of the residual effects of what has happened to that character come in throughout the film. I do wish they did a little more job in the writing to give Micah a little more to build on some of those things. I wanted to know a few more things. When they do explore things like the past and the family, it's really well done. I don't think they always explore it enough, at least not in the first 2/3. They kind of jump into the end and do it, and it's really, really nice when they do. I wish they spent more time with the intricacies about why she is the way she is, because when they do, it's beautiful, and then they kind of skip over it and you go, there's something really interesting here. I wish they had given this more time, but it's more of a pacing and writing issue than it is a Micah Monroe issue, because when she gets story, the story's really good. Also, a shout out as far as the acting goes to another character that is in an insane asylum. Easy for me to say. I didn't write down the character's name or the actor's name, but in particular, that was the most tense scene in the movie for me, and that's a disservice on my part for not writing that down, because that scene stuck with me, and that dialogue, while being offbeat and off-kilter, is really, really good. It's the best dialogue of the film, where sometimes I feel like there's not enough dialogue, or the dialogue is lacking, or the pacing of the dialogue is lacking. But this one character in the insane asylum, really, really good dialogue, good acting, good tension. Final positive, overall, the story in general is really good. It does harken back to things like Silence of the Lambs, or a lot of the other, I've heard people say Seven. I didn't really get Seven from this, but lots of like the 90s, 80s and 90s, like criminal detective, horror, thriller, FBI follows a killer kind of movies. Kiss the Girl and Silence of the Lambs are what I thought of. The story overall is a good nod to those, and it is a well fleshed out story in a lot of ways, and also kind of reminds me of those things while still being somewhat original in its own personal candor. So I like the story here. Getting into a few negatives. Number one, it's a pretty confusing story, and it's confusing because the writing's a little confusing, but more so the pacing and how things are divulged is confusing. You're meant to be off kilter in the beginning, and you're meant to not really understand everything, but you spend 2/3 or even 3/4 of the movie going, what the hell is this? What is going on here? And then they just give you a big expository dump of exposition and backstory all in like 5 sentences, and you get the entire story and you go, okay, I wish they didn't wait for an hour and 30 minutes into an hour and 40 minute story here to do that. But it all makes sense now. I could follow it all. You can the story's not confusing as far as following beat to beat. You just don't really know exactly what or exactly why. And then all of a sudden, with 20 minutes left in the movie, they go blah blah blah. Here's 5 sentences. Here's the whole thing, and you're like, okay, don't know if I like the delivery of that, but they did explain it, and it does all make sense. And then after they explain it, something else happens, and you're like, I don't understand that now. So I'm confused all over again. So it's confusion, explanation, confusion. So to me overall, I didn't like the pacing of the explanation of the story, or necessarily what came after the explanation, because it didn't add up for me. Then we have, I put satanic stuff. I won't get into exactly what is going on. You've seen some reviews probably. You've seen the trailer. You know it's a cult killer story, so you kind of get that. It does pull you in some different directions than you expect, and that is a good nod to the story on Oz Perkins' part. But some of the cult stuff is really ham-fisted. It's really over the top and it's really on the nose. And it's very much like if you've seen cults or especially satanic type stuff before, it can be a little cheesy and it can be a little bit underdeveloped. And they just kind of fall back on Satan, Satan. They kind of just rely on the basic tenets of evil. And that's what they do in this movie. The cult itself would have served from being a little more original or having its own set of rules or its own set of reasoning aside from just being we are evil. And that's not spoiling anything. That I think there's some of that stuff is in the promotional materials. But I think some of the cult stuff is underdeveloped and the stuff they do talk about is a little bit ham-fisted for me. So I don't love that. Nick Cage's tone. This is the negative in Nick Cage. And I'll just lump it all together here. Micah Monroe is not explored enough. And while she does a wonderful job, there's more that I want to know. There's more aspects between the asylum and the family and all the different things that places she goes and things she goes to and through. I want to hear more from her. But also Nicolas Cage, his tone doesn't always match the moments of the scenes, even the same scenes that he's in. When he's killing those underspoken, understated, but direct, tense moments, he starts to bust into this Tim Curry Pennywise or this over-the-top, ham-fisted caricature. And you're like, oh my god, you just kind of broke a bit of the tension. Yeah, it's tense. He's weird. He does it well. He acts this character and he gives you chills. But there's sometimes when it's like you should pick a tone and kind of stick to it. I feel like he's going more for an acting award here than he is trying to nail the tone of the scene. And I don't know whether that was Osgood Perkins going, hey, we got Nick Cage, just go over the top. Or whether they just let Nick Cage do what he wants to do and he kind of always takes those roles like that. So I think people expect it and like it, and I think that's why they do it. Here, I think he really could have been a silent assassin. I think a little less is more sometimes for his performances, and I think this one really could have been his hallmark horror performance if he had just stayed in that almost Jeffrey Holder or almost Max Cady or Patrick Bateman. If he had stayed in that deliberate deliverance, I think it would have been so much nicer. I think the over-the-top wackiness just made me roll my eyes a little bit and go, okay, it's still creepy, but I've seen enough of that Nick Cage. I wanted the one he started to go in the direction of. So that was a bit off for me. And then finally the ending. Like I said, it's good movie the whole time, but drawn out and confusing. And then the exposition is dumped at you in the final 20 minutes, and you go, okay, I didn't like the way this was done, but I like that it was explained, and now it all makes sense. And then something else happens, and I'm like, I have a lot of questions, and I can't pose those questions right now to you guys and tell you exactly what it is because it would spoil things in the movie, so I won't do that. But I just think for all the build-up, and you finally get some clarity, and then it just kind of craps on it again, and it goes, oh no, we're going to find a way to end this the way we want to. So, didn't love the ending either. Overall, mixed bag. Lots of good, lots of bad. I think it's an interesting story. I think it's mostly well acted. I think the locations and the technical aspects are absolutely beautiful. I think there's a lot of originality and a lot of moments that stand out as not only being tense, but being earnest, and I really enjoy those. Sometimes it goes over the top, sometimes it gets a little purposely confusing, and sometimes it just wants to mess with your head and be either a little too much or a little too little. And so there's moments it delivers and moments it does not. I would recommend you go see it, though, because I like the cast and crew involved, and it is kind of an indie horror by comparison, and I want you guys to go support Longlegs if you can. I'm going to give this one a 5.5 out of 10, which sadly by proxy still makes this my fourth favorite horror movie of the year. So far I'm sitting at Late Night with the Devil is 1, Immaculate is 2, Maxine is 3, and Longlegs is 4. While I didn't love 3 and 4, I've liked them both, and that says more than I have for most horror this year. So, I don't mean to damn it with faint praise. It's better than average. It's worth watching. Some of you guys will love it. Some of you guys will hate it. If you're a big Nick Cage guy and you like the style of Osgood Perkins, this is exactly what you think it's going to be. Over-the-top Nick Cage, Osgood Perkins doing long, slow shots with pretty good storytelling. If you don't like Osgood Perkins or Nick Cage, you're not going to like this. Check it out and tell me what you think. I got a 5.5 out of 10. If you saw it, what'd you think? Tell me in the comments down below. If you haven't seen it, it's still in theaters. Go check it out. I recommend it. And what else do you guys want to see me review? Please like, share, and subscribe to these videos if you like these movie deep dives, and I will talk to you guys soon. Stay scared. Enjoy the movies.